Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and self-publishing. And today we have a very special guest who is a man of many talents. It is Mr. Pat Daly, who is a pilot, an engineer, and a science fiction writer. Thank you so much for joining us, Pat. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are y'all?
Oh, I'm doing excellently. I'm getting blinded by the light that keeps pouring through here. But apart from that, I am doing great. Well, Pat, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems, and then author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Great. Thanks, Roland, and thanks for joining us, Pat. Yeah, like you've got quite the resume there, and I know that you write science fiction. You weave a lot of your real world expertise into your books. But I think one of the things we also wanted to talk about today is you used to be traditionally published, and I know you had maybe a disappointing experience with that, and then moved over to self-publishing. And I think that's we talk with authors about that sort of experience from time to time, and it's always a different experience that everyone has. There's a lot of reasons why people are disillusioned by traditional publishing and why they move. So I always find it interesting to talk through those things because they are relevant to a lot of our listeners. So why don't you tell us a bit about your history as an author and how you got started with the traditional publishing, and then what sort of happened. We can go from there, but what happened led you over to self-publishing, etc. Right?
Sure. I started writing my first novel in 2017, and went pretty well. By the time I was through 8 revisions, it was now 2018, and I started the incredibly painful querying journey. And if there was ever a process seemingly purpose designed to make you want to claw your own eyes out, it is querying for an agent down the path of traditional publishing. It's brutal. And I guess I was ready for rejection. I wasn't so much ready to be ignored. And so much of your responses are nothing. But in any case, after querying for about 6 months, and actually had to be 80, 90 query letters that I sent out, some generated requests for chapters, others just hit silence. I found a publisher that was interested. This was a query direct to a publisher as opposed to going through an agent. And they picked me up and worked with me through getting my first book published. And first 6 months of sales were going well. I was happy with all that. They were setting me up for a fair number of author events. Again, also happy to do that. And then COVID hit, and I had a lot more time to write, so I started banging away at novel number 2. And when I got that finished, I told my publisher, okay, book 2 is ready. Let's go. And I was told, we're going to wait 2 years.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because we've got a bit of a backlog, so we're just going to wait 2 years. And I said, well, I write near future science fiction. And if we wait 2 years, there's always a chance that reality is going to surpass my novel.
Yeah.
So I'd really like to do it faster than that. And I said, no, that's just kind of the schedule. We can put it out, we can get advanced reader copies, all that stuff. And we went back and forth for probably 3 or 4 months and just never came to an equitable resolution. At least not one that I could live with. I'm sure they felt it was equitable. I did not. And so I went through the process of, I actually bought my first book back from them and then republished it under my own imprint and went from there. I've been a much happier guy since then. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's the the delay between publication and between finishing and publication is always like one of the biggest issues, other than royalty split and all that. Yeah, self-publishers are almost spoiled in the fact that I can finish my book today and I can upload it today. I'm done. It can be on sale tomorrow. Whereas traditional publishing, I mean, usually it's not quite that long, I don't think, but 2 years is ridiculous. But a year is standard, I think.
Yeah, and maybe I probably could have lived with a year, but along the way I'd gotten some feedback from fans, and this is probably my bad for not having thoroughly read an early copy of this from the publisher. The editor miscorrected some of the things that I had in the book and actually introduced typographical errors into the manuscript. And that was just...
That's not the ideal thing when you hire an editor.
Yeah, it's sort of the opposite of what they're supposed to do, right?
Yep.
That's interesting. So you compared your original manuscript and you saw they added, and they were just typos, or were they like they're trying to fix something that really didn't need to be fixed?
Well, some were typos, and another one was I got an email from a reader saying, "Hey, I really enjoyed the joke that you used to start chapter 14 or whatever it is." So I go, okay, I pulled one of the books off my shelf and I go to chapter 14 and I look at it and it was, oh my God. Because the joke is being told by a computer, and the joke goes something like this. There are 10 kinds of people in the world, those that understand binary and those that do not. So 10 in binary, that's 2. And so even if they'd replaced the numerals 1 and 0 with 2, I could have lived with that. But instead, since it shows up as 1 and 0 and they're not fluent in any way in binary, they translated that as 10. And so it's no longer a joke.
Yeah, but the person
it's kind of a joke, just not a funny one.
Yeah, that's rough. So you said you had to buy the book back. So when you were published by them and they were doing whatever, you said you were initially happy with how it went. So sales, I guess, were pretty good. Did you, when you had to buy the book back, did you have to end up spending more than you'd made on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was painful. I think I may have recouped it since, but it was a painful lesson to live through.
Right. But I guess you could have left it with them and still done book 2 self-published, or did you have a contract basically saying, they had rights to book 2?
Yeah, they had a contract that gave them rights to everything told in this universe for, it was either 3 or 5 years. And I could have left this one with them, but then I would have had to pivot to another story that was waiting in the wings. But I felt like I had momentum with this series, and I wanted to keep that up.
So in order to publish book 2 in that universe, you had to buy book 1. You had to basically buy yourself out of the contract.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Those contracts are often, I assume that one is fairly standard, right? That doesn't sound like, it's anything too crazy. Sometimes we hear stories about publishers doing not such ethical things. I think that one is sort of standard.
Yeah.
But it's tough because when you make those deals, you don't necessarily think about, well, what happens if they kind of screw me with their decisions and I'm forced to have to do that, right? Which is kind of what happened, right? If they have nothing in the contract saying they have to publish the book X amount of time after you published it, they could say, 10 years, right? And then you're like, well, I'm stuck. Yeah, it's hard, right?
Yep.
Did you end up having any lawyers looking at it ahead of time?
I did not. And again,
it doesn't mean that there was anything bad in there. I don't know if that would have been something they would have changed for you and said, let's put something in there that says how long they should take between publications. But yeah. So when you moved to self-publishing, what were the differences? It sounds like your publisher at least was doing more than a lot of publishers we're hearing about these days. Like they were sending you on book events and stuff like that, right? Whereas a lot of them now, they're just like, promote your own book, which to me is like, what are you doing then?
No kidding. It's like, you're getting it distributed into mainline bookstores, but even those don't sell that many books these days.
Right.
The first thing I did was I hired my own editor. And that's there's various levels of editor. One is a copy editor, one's a developmental editor, line editors, all that kind of stuff. And so I hired a developmental editor first. And one of the things I came across there is a lot of people that are out on the market as developmental editors are also authors. And that's great. At least they know the pain from our perspective. What I didn't pick up initially was that what genre they write in is important to their developmental mindset. And
what good advice. That's a really good observation. You're right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the person that I seem to connect best with wrote children's books and maybe mid-grade or children's books, chapter books, but for a younger audience than what I was aiming for. And so they had some input that reflected that. As in, you've got kind of a complex plot here. You may want to simplify it. And, I'd like to trust my readers to be able to stick with at least some of the science I'm talking about. And so,
that's tricky. I mean, I was thinking about that the other day when I was watching Pluribus, and it was a great sci-fi show, and the writing I thought was fantastic in a lot of those early episodes. And one of the things I was thinking about was the level, understanding how much you really need to explain to an audience and how much you can leave for them to figure out themselves is a very, very fine line. And knowing that is a skill in itself. And so, like you said, like as the writer, you make those decisions. And then when you pull an editor in, if they have a different feeling about that, and that's going to come from what they do. So yeah, children's editor who is like, oh, we have to explain everything and make it all black and white is maybe not the best fit because of that very fine line. You want somebody who's like a science fiction, speculative fiction kind of developmental editor who can help with that and say, okay, yeah, they can, most people will figure this out, but this part, not just let's dumb everything down.
They might get the binary joke if they're actually fiction writing.
Yep.
Yeah.
They might have gotten that.
Mm-hmm.
But that I've heard often that humor doesn't always translate well in writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've tried to be better about injecting humor, making sure, get some beta readers to weigh in on it. Does this joke land?
Yeah.
Does it make any sense? So because one of the things I have discovered is that quite frequently other people don't think I'm nearly as funny as I do.
My wife says the same thing about me.
Yeah. No, and I think beta readers, so they'll be helpful with that, but they're also helpful with that other issue where, are you able to follow this? Was this something that was explained well enough already, or did you need more, or did I explain it too much? Beta readers are really great for that. When you were with your publisher, did they give you any sort of beta reader stuff, or is it just here's your editor and let's go?
Yeah, it was. They wanted me to join a writing guild, and so I did that. Joined the writing guild, and then that's great for the next manuscript. Not so great for the one that's going through their editing process. Now, the first editor, the developmental editor they had me work with, was really good about catching some things that could either have been offensive or were just not clear. So they helped quite a bit there. It was a little more so than when it went to the copy editing where I had the real issues.
Yeah.
Now, what do you mean? What were the real issues in the copy editing that you?
Well, I'm not a big fan of changing happy to glad unless happy shows up 8 times on a page. Then it starts being redundant. And so, I wasn't a big fan of that, but also just correcting. I did a lot of stuff in metric, and it's as if metric completely blew their mind. And so they tried to just directly convert kilometers to miles and meters to yards. And yeah, you're relatively close, but if for something that might be a little more precise, not quite the same.
Well, also in science, then you do use the metric system. I mean, Star Trek: The Next Generation, that's my comfort food that I watch, and they talk in meters and kilos and stuff like that, because I mean that's what NASA uses, isn't it?
No.
Oh, isn't it? There we go.
Unfortunately not. In fact, one of the little side tales I have in my first book is there was a thing called the Mars Climate Observer. And it was a probe that NASA launched to Mars to go into a polar orbit, observe their climate, see what's going on. Okay, this ended up being a huge disaster because they had Johnson Space Center and Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena, California. JPL was running everything, and I'm not sure which side was which, but one was using metric, the other was using imperial. So when JPL came out and said, oh, you need a delta V of 50, NASA interpreted that to mean meters per second or feet per second. And so they're off by a fairly significant margin.
Yes.
Instead of the probe going into a nice little parking orbit around Mars, it slammed right into the planet, and 300 million of our taxpayer dollars went with it.
Wow. I remember that story. Yeah. It was like somebody did a bad calculation conversion or something like that, or they didn't convert it. Yeah. I remember that. I guess because your publisher was probably US based, right? So they wanted everything to be in. Why? Yeah.
Yep, US based.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. People changing things like that. I mean, if your whole book is written that way, then they shouldn't be converting it. I don't know. If they think that it's going to throw people off, I don't know. We have people that write in British English versus US English, and
I'm people.
Right. But once and listen, I am too. I'm Canadian, right? So we use British English, but when I'm writing things, I usually spell things the US way because that's where most of my stuff is going and most of my readers are. And I've seen in the review section of, so like Hidden Gems, we work with reviews, and I know like one of the things that sometimes people will complain about it is like, oh, you spelled a bunch of things wrong. And when you look into it, it's like, no, they didn't. They're British or they're Canadian, and they use that. So I often tell people in their blurb, write that it was written in, British English or whatever, so that people know that those aren't spelling mistakes. It's just,
yeah. And I don't know. It's if you. I'm a J.K. Rowling fan, and she'll talk stone, and he's trying to lose a few stone.
Oh yes.
Yeah. What the hell's a stone? For some reason, I got it in my head that a stone was 20 pounds, which apparently it's not. I think it's actually 14. Maybe.
I'm afraid to say I've forgotten because I've lived in America for so long.
Okay. Well, so. When they transliterate sometimes her work into American English, they'll convert it to pounds, and but it's why it's what makes it, I don't know, I think a little more authentic for me. I can hear the voices better, and if I don't know what a stone is and I'm not curious about it, then damn it, I can use Google.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, trying to dumb things down for the audience. I was there's a whole thing that has come out recently because I guess Matt Damon mentioned it, but apparently it's always been true. It's just nobody ever says it. It's like when Netflix creates things, when they film movies and shows specifically for Netflix, they have sort of a mandate where they make you repeat information over and over again because we live in a time where everyone's on their phones. And if you're watching a show while you're on your phone and you miss a key piece of information, you can't follow it. So they make you sort of repeat it over and over. And he sort of mentioned that that's just the way that you have to film for Netflix. And I guess, Netflix wasn't happy that he like sort of vocalized that. But yeah, it's almost like the world we live in. Everyone feels like you've got to dumb things down. Whereas when you're writing science fiction, I think that's one of those cases where, if you're writing for a different kind of audience. I think it's an audience that wants their mind to be stretched a little bit, and so you can allow for them to use their brain a bit more than some other genres.
Yeah,
that's the way I feel.
Yeah, growing up, I read all the classic sci-fi stuff: Asimov, Clarke, Heinlein.
Yes.
And then more recently Gibson and Stevenson. And I have to say that probably half of my scientific education came from those books.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I actually got into the class in school, it was like, I know this.
Yeah. So was there anything with your traditional publisher that they did for you that you found is more that's sort of difficult for you to do yourself? I mean, obviously there's costs involved. I assume that they did the editing regardless of how good it was, and they paid for that because they probably had an in-house editor. But when you start self-publishing, you actually have to do it yourself and pay for it yourself.
Yeah, the thing they did for me that I think I undervalued before I left was publicity. They had signed an agreement with Mickey Mickelson, Creative Edge, and he was getting me on a ton of stuff, and it worked out really well. Bizarrely, I actually connected with people I hadn't talked to in 30 years because they had heard me on some podcast, and that reconnected us. They bought my books, reviewed my books, so that was wonderful. So when I published my second book on my own, I reached out and tried a couple of individual contracts for publicity, and one I had some fairly decent success with a firm out of the UK, and then another US based firm that was just money flushed. You know, they set me up for a book signing, and they told me the name of the store, and it was supposed to be here in Houston. Well, I drive down there, and I'm actually with my wife, and we're looking at this place. I said, this can't be right. I'm doing a book signing in a pharmacy.
Oh,
Yeah. And not only that, it's not a pharmacy in the best part of Houston. So they've got the bars on their doors and windows, and they've got the door closed. So you actually have to push a buzzer to get let in. And I'm thought, probably not going to get a whole lot of walk-in book readers here. So
I'm thinking like about the pharmacies around here. I guess they do have a section where they sell books, but I can't imagine somebody signing there. It's just a
it's
little
like
area.
half a shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even see people signing sometimes in grocery stores, and I always think, that's if you're going to do a signing, a library is a good place, a bookstore is a good place. A venue, a specific venue is good, but pharmacies and in the produce aisle at Kroger, probably not so great.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've never seen that. I mean, generally here, I've gone to like a farmer's market where they'll have an author will set up a little kiosk selling their book, and so they'll do signings and stuff like that. A local author, which makes some sense. It's not necessarily where I would go to find that, but because they're local and it's like, oh, we got people coming, then yeah, it's an enterprising idea.
Yeah.
but I wouldn't necessarily think that doing it at a pharmacy or grocery store would be good. Yeah, we've had Mickey on the show, and he he's great. And so he was working with your publisher, and that's how you got it. And then so you went back afterwards, like you're still using him, right?
I did. I didn't go back immediately, and props for Mickey for this, because when I reached out to him immediately after I went out on my own, he felt like there would be a conflict of interest. Well, and so good for him. It's nice to see ethics on display in the world. And over time, though, he parted ways from my publisher. And so when I reached out to him the second time, it was arms wide open. Yeah, welcome back. Here we go.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's nice that you, because Mickey was one of the good things that you did find out through that experience.
Yeah. And also they have there's a Amy Ravichandran runs a company called Abundantly Social, and she and her company work on that aspect of publicity, the social media, pumping your stuff out there via that. And they were also working with my first publisher and have departed or parted ways since then. So I've also connected back with that company.
Yeah, Amy was on here as well, I believe. She works closely with Mickey. That's that, and it's interesting that that's one of the things that you thought that they did well, because as I said, that's one of those things that actually we hear more from authors about, how traditional publishers are starting to do less and less of the publicity side of it and leaving it up to the author to go and do themselves, which to me, that's one of the only value adds they still had as a traditional publisher, and now they're getting rid of that. So I don't even understand. I think at this point, the only reason people do traditional publishing is because there still is that sort of stigma against self-publishing, and people thinking that you're not a real author if you haven't been traditionally published, which is not at all true. But it's like one of those things that it's taking a while for people to wrap their heads around, I guess.
True. And I think traditional publishers still probably do a better job, certainly than I do, in terms of getting advanced reader copies out and getting reviews preloaded and ready to go. So that that is helpful. And I'm looking forward to when my next book comes out, what Mickey and Amy can help me put together along those lines.
Right. And I guess, are you finding that your sales have been better, worse, similar from since you left?
Better.
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 And why do you, not just what you're earning, obviously you're earning more, but you're making more raw sales?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any idea why that is?
I think it's, you develop if you're writing a series, you develop some loyalty early on, and that helps, I think, a lot. Is you get some readers that fall in love with the series early on, and then the more they love it, the more they share it with other people, and I think that is tremendously helpful to have that core group of loyal fans.
So, okay, so you're saying they've improved because you have more books now. Yeah, okay. But what I meant more was, when you pulled it from your first book from them and put the first book back up before you'd really put the second book up, were you seeing sort of similar sales of that first book? But yeah, I get, like, as you go on with the series, for sure, hopefully, you're going to have exponential growth with each book. Sometimes it does slow down, but the more books you have, there's more entry points and more places where people can discover it. But I'm just curious whether or not those sales one for one were similar or not.
Not initially. I'd say I probably took a 6 months dip,
right,
in the book when I published it as a second edition.
Right.
Bizarrely, that created a decent market for first editions, where you could, at one point you could buy it for $15 on Amazon, and now suddenly people are selling used books on Amazon for $35-$40 because it's out of print. And so I had half a box at home, and I thought, okay, I'm going to leak these out a bit at a time to try to get some of my money back.
Wow, that's a good idea. So I guess paperback sales. So initially with the traditional publisher, you were in stores. When you started self-publishing, you're probably not necessarily in stores unless you're going through a distributor. Like, are you doing like a create space or whatever they call it, KDP publishing? Direct to direct. On-demand printing, or did you go through one of the services that will put you in the bookstores?
Well, I went the next two books. I went straight through KDP,
okay.
And that was something else that my original publisher did well, was get me get me on ebooks fairly quickly, but they had really very little interest in doing audiobooks.
That's interesting.
Because I think the audiobook market is growing pretty rapidly. And so that was one of the first things I did once I got the book back, was I found somebody to narrate and produce. So everything's available on as an audiobook now.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm surprised actually that usually the publishers these days are pretty on that, but I guess it depends on how big they are, because it is an expense. I'm sure you've found that when you hired your own, it's not cheap.
Yeah, not cheap, but man, a great way to find mistakes. As you're you listen to somebody read your words back to you, and you go, that is not what I said.
Yes,
it is what I said. But,
or it's what the editor changed it to, right? Did you find that the audiobook narrator told you about things that didn't make sense? I wonder, like, if they're reading it and they're like finding mistakes as you read it, because that's one of those things that people say, when you're self-editing your work, read it out loud, so that, because you can definitely hear the mistakes more than when you're just scanning it with your eyes. And so I imagine if somebody is narrating the book, they're going to notice all of a sudden things because they're trying to read them and they're not making sense. Do they tell you about that?
No, I
No.
found that interesting. They did, they'd come back with some questions, or they just wing a pronunciation of a name or a bit of technical jargon, and I'd have to go back and get them to correct that. And then I had a guy do the book layout, and he did these really cool section dividers, and they were long strings of binary. And in the second edition of my first book, I actually embedded a coded message in the section dividers. And man, I would never do that again. I mean, I thought it was a cool idea, and some people picked up on it. But the problem for me was keeping track of all of them and making sure that they are, digit for digit correct, and that you haven't skipped one and nothing's repeated that shouldn't be repeated. So I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder if it's easier with AI. Could you like put it in AI and say, "Is this translate this for me? Does this make sense?"
Oh yeah, probably
easier.
Probably.
I mean, you'd have to verify it with various AIs to make sure they're not hallucinating on you. But
I've got a friend who swears he solved the Zodiac killer by using AI, and I'm like, sure, buddy.
Well, listen, I mean, they did some. They did have AI crack a few. It was those FBI codes that they had on the statue in Langley or something like that have been there for years and years and years. That I think AI has cracked recently, where somebody had created these codes and they cracked one or two over the years, but nobody's been able to crack, a couple of them, and I guess somebody used AI to do it. So it can be done.
Yeah,
if you know what you're doing. So I guess there's no looking back for you, right? You've moved on. Self-publishing, it's been much better experience for you than the traditional publishing.
It has,
No
and it doesn't mean I don't look back though.
Yeah.
Because I'm working on my first book that is outside the series, and it's targeted to a little older demographic. And so that's got me thinking, should I give the traditional publishing another shot? And I haven't talked myself into it or out of it yet, but I have a friend.
That's for a different series?
Yeah, for a different series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess you'd have to sort of you'd go in with your eyes wide open now and say, okay, I know if I'm doing this, it's going to be a lot of time in between each book, in between when I publish and when I'm finished and when it publishes. If you're okay with that, right? Or you'll maybe sign a different contract that says, you have to get it done within a year of me giving it to you or something. I don't even know if that's acceptable.
Yeah, and I'm also trying to make them a little less sensitive to the onrushing wave of the future.
Right. You're sort of setting it farther in the future, is that?
Yeah, a little farther in the future, and also dabbling a little bit with parallel timelines.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I guess there's certain things you can do that make it less susceptible to catching up with. I mean, things move so fast, you never know. But yeah. So why would you go back? Is it really just to get yourself into the bookstores? Or, I mean, now that you make more per unit, way more, I'm sure, per unit. So what is it really, just the idea that you want to sell the physical books, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's that, and also I used to work with a guy who was an author, and one of the things he talked about was anytime he and his family walked into a Barnes and Noble, they would find his books and create a new little end cap display featuring his books. So it's a little bit of guerrilla marketing going on there. But I just I like the idea of deeper distribution channels. So and maybe even more robust editing.
But the editor you had from your traditional wasn't good. So
yeah, that's true.
But you wouldn't have to pay for it, I guess.
Yeah.
But in the end, it comes out of your money. So I
Yeah.
mean, in the sense that you're paying more, you're giving up more of your royalties so that you get those things for free. Whereas,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's funny though that you mentioned that, because in Pluribus she did that as well. Like she walked by the airport display. They have the little books displays, and her book was there, and she had her assistant go and rearrange it so her book was front and center. It's exactly. I saw that, and I'm like, I wonder how many authors do that when they walk into a store.
Yeah. Well, I know one who will if he ever gets a chance.
I would do it too. I never had the traditional. I never went the traditional route, so I wasn't in bookstores. But I would absolutely do that if that was me.
I mean, that's really what traditional publishing still holds over the head of self-publishing, is actually being able to get books in bookstores.
Yeah. And even though for the last book, or I should say the latest book in the series, I pivoted away from Amazon and from KDP, and I had Ingram Spark publish it, or as the print and wholesaler of it. And I'm still waiting to see if that's going to make an appreciable difference, because theoretically they do have entrees into bookstores. And I had a school librarian come up to me after she read the first book, and she said, "Is this available on Ingram? Because that's where the school district orders all our books." I said, "Oh, no, it's not." So she said, "Well, I'll try to get them to change to being able to buy direct from Amazon." Well, now you're fighting a school district, 60,000 students. Probably not going to change.
No, probably not. But you can go to Ingram Store. There are authors that are doing it through Ingram. That you don't have to use. It's easier, absolutely. I mean, they make it so that it's like more like a one-stop thing, so you can use Kindle, or KDP publishing. But you can, if you go through Ingram, they do have options for going to bookstores. I think, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
So you can do it. It's more work.
Yeah,
but that's self-publishing, right? It's doing everything yourself.
It is.
But
it
you
is.
reap that reward.
Yeah, it's like running a business again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's 100% what it is.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, we are approaching the top of the hour, so we're going to have to start wrapping things up. But it's been fascinating talking to you, Pat. Where can people find your books?
Well, books are available on Amazon. The 4 books in the series are Spark, Fire, Orkland, and Embers is the latest book in the series. And then of course, I'm available. My website is thepatdaily.com. That's where I blog. And then I'm also on Instagram at Pat Daily Picks. And I'm still on X. It's just, I don't know if anybody else is. So yeah, I just don't, I'm at Pat Daily Author on X, but I don't know. Do you tweet anymore on X, or do you X on X?
I still call it Twitter, because
extricate.
I call it Facebook instead of Meta now too. So I don't know. The original name is the one I stick with.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make sure to pop a link to your website down in the description of this video. So if you are listening to this or watching it on YouTube and you've enjoyed everything Pat has had to say, scroll down there and just click on that link and go to his website. And while you're there, because you're scrolling down there, you'll see that big empty comment box. So make sure you leave Pat a comment and let him know how much you've appreciated everything he has shared with us today. And also there's that like button. There's that subscribe button if you haven't already. And there's even a little bell icon. You can click on that and get notified every time there is a new episode of Fully Booked, which of course there will be next week. So Pat, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
And we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. So until then, cheerio.